I have a confession to make. I actually love writing tests. Hello, this is Code and Optimism, a show where we explore how to solve problems faster with software. And today, we're going to talk about automated testing and some of its surprising benefits, and how I have come to love creating, updating, and maintaining automated test suites over the years. The first surprising benefit to automated testing is it actually helps you write better code. And this is for two reasons. The first reason is because it helps us understand our code better. When we're writing our code, we try to simulate in our head what we think the code's going to do. And no matter how good we think we are at that, we're terrible compared to actually running on a computer. So as you start to write your tests, you're going to be poking at your code and causing it to do things that you may not have anticipated. The second reason, and the more important of the two, is the easier code is to test, the better the code is. And so if you're writing tests and you're finding it's hard to test your code, instead of coming out with the mentality of, ooh, look, a puzzle, how am I going to test this? Instead saying, oh, this is too hard to test. How can I make my code better so that it's easier to test? You are going to iteratively make your code way better because of the tests that you're writing. Now, why would this be true? This is true because of modularity. The more modular your code is, the easier it will be to test. And therefore, as you're trying to make your code better to make it easier to test, you're going to be making your code more modular. And this all suggests one of the key requirements of good automated testing, and that's that you are writing it as you are writing your code, back and forth. Because if you are writing it after you've written your code, you're not going to go back and fix your code. If you're writing it as you're writing your code, it will guide you down a path of ever better code. The second surprising benefit of automated testing is documentation and communication. It is a bit surprising, but automated testing has many things going for it in terms of being the best way to document your code. It is, for one, precise and accurate because it actually is running your code and it is actually testing the results. It is a list of working examples. So if someone wants to see how to use your code, they can go find examples in the tests and they can use them directly. They're working. It is the most up-to-date because if it gets behind, if it is no longer in sync with how the application actually works, the test will start failing, which also means it's going to be the most well-maintained. Last, it's usually also the most exhaustive because you're going to be testing all the edge cases. Documentation rarely goes in and documents all of the edge cases. It can be the most definitive documentation of your product, and it has the best chance of succeeding in that way. But even still, even if you didn't really go into it thinking about how great you're going to be documenting your application, anyone else who comes in and tries to understand how your code works can go to the tests and see what the actual outputs are supposed to be. And that is a fabulous way to understand how it's supposed to work. There's another benefit, though, in the communication category of testing, and that is what you have tested is now documented. You have documented what has been tested. That is helpful for your team, it's helpful for your client, it is helpful for your team to be able to look at it and understand what you might have missed. It's helpful for them to know what you've already done so they don't test it. Also, all these ways, testing is a fabulous way to document and communicate about your code. The final benefit of automated testing is speed. Sure, you can test your code manually, and in fact, you can do that generally faster than writing automated tests the first time. Because the thing is, if you test your code as you write it, then you're going to have all of the edge cases in your head. You're going to know what to test. You're going to understand every edge of your code. But the problem is when you come back 6 months later and you have some other piece of code loaded up in your head and you've forgotten the ins and outs and fine details of this code. Either you're going to go spend a lot of time re-understanding that code, reloading it into your head, or you're going to be very nervous about making changes to it for fear of what you might break. But if you've got good automated testing, it's no problem. You go in and make your changes, you run your tests. If they all pass, you're good. And this is, of course, amplified if you're working in a team with other people's code. Going in to try to modify someone else's code that you don't fully understand can be a nightmare unless they have automated tests, in which case you've got good documentation on how it's supposed to work. You can run the test to validate whether or not your change broke anything, and you can keep having high velocity. I had an experience like this on my Imikimi startup, where our code had gotten so big and bloated after many years of development by myself and my other members of the team that I became really terrified of making any changes to the code, and our forward velocity ground to a halt because we had no tests. We had no way to check to see if what we were changing would break this monstrous piece of code. Now, unfortunately, I never managed to recover that chunk of code. Eventually, we had to burn it and start from scratch. But the new code, I promised myself, was not going to have this problem again. And indeed, on the new code base, I wrote tons of tests. And it was my first time writing a bunch of tests, so I've gotten much better since then. But it did allow me to keep my velocity up because I could keep going back, running the tests, seeing how things are supposed to work, making a small change, and changing it with confidence. That's the true superpower of automated testing, is that it allows you to have the velocity you had at the beginning of your project throughout the project, because it's always like you're in a greenfield scenario. You come in, you know where the status is, you run the test, you can validate where you're at, you can make a change, and if it works, you know you're in good shape. So, at the high level, there's really the three things. It'll help you write better code, it's the best form of documentation, and it will actually accelerate your code. Code plus tests is faster than just code alone. And I've come to love writing tests because not only all these things, I like writing code that works. I like writing code that I can get done quickly. I like having good documentation when I go back to my code later and want to understand what the heck it's doing. But most of all, it's also our chance to play with our code. We just wrote this cool code, and now we can literally play with it. That's what testing can be. It can be a chance to poke and prod it and twiddle with it and see what it does and see how it works. And does it blow up when you put 1,000 times as much in as you thought you did? All of these things can make writing tests pretty darn fun. Now, in follow-up episodes, we're going to dive in and I'm going to talk a bit about how I think you can do testing in a way that facilitates these three benefits and keeps it fun and light and agile. But for today, I'll say thank you very much for spending your valuable time with me. And remember, all problems are solvable with enough knowledge.